Hello fellow video game collectors. Today I want to do a quick review for the recently released game I Am Setsuna. Unfortunately, the game is only available digitally on PlayStation 4 and Steam. So what is the game about? I Am Setsuna is a throwback to the glory days of classic RPGs, in particular Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy. The story follows a very common RPG trope. The world must be saved from ever-encroaching monsters, and the only way to be rid of them is to sacrifice a young girl named Setsuna. The party of heroes must protect Setsuna on her dark journey to the Sacred Last Lands to carry out her task. In other words, the plot is basically Final Fantasy X all over again. The combat system should be very familiar to those who have previously played Chrono Trigger. That's because it is essentially the exact same combat system. As you walk up to monsters on the screen, your three party members will immediately engage in combat. Fights are turn-based with the very familiar active time battle system, where each character has a bar that must be filled up before acting. Additionally, characters can keep waiting after the action bar is filled up to gain additional Setsuna points, which are used for momentum. When a character uses momentum, it enhances the character's attack or ability by doing additional damage or effects. You are able to use momentum by pressing the square button when a flash on the screen occurs while performing a standard action in battle. Each character has certain techs that they can use individually or in combination with other characters. Techs are assigned to characters by equipping Sprite Knight that grant them that particular tech ability, sort of like Final Fantasy VII's Materia system. The party gains Sprite Knight by the game's unique trading system. Instead of the usual selling of monster loot for just cash, the loot that you sell to the merchant is also tracked by him. You are then able to craft new Sprite Knight by using pieces of loot that you sold to the merchant previously. Characters are limited in how many Sprite Knights they can equip. You can buy or find talismans that can unlock more slots to equip Sprite Knight, as well as they provide bonus flux effects. But what is flux? Randomly during battle, a flux will occur which causes certain effects to happen in battle. Using momentum during a flux can have the bonus flux effects from your talisman be permanently added to your Sprite Knight. However, this very rarely happened to me, to the point that the entire system could be easily missed and ignored. Leveling up your characters in I Am Setsuna is also a bit different. The only stats that will change when you level up are your hit points and mana points. If you want to increase your other stats such as attack or defense, you must buy new weapons. The weapon you equip controls the majority of your stats. You can also choose to buy materials to upgrade your current weapon with better stats, but I honestly never found the need to do that. I was always fine with just buying new weapons and never upgrading them. I didn't upgrade any of my weapons until the end of the game. So how does the game play? For the most part, the game is one long corridor. You go to a town, you talk to the townspeople, you go to the dungeon, you fight the boss, and then you go to the next town. Rinse and repeat for the majority of the game. There is no reward for exploring the world, as there is almost nothing else to explore. It's just one giant white wasteland of the same snow over and over again. You travel to new areas, but they don't feel like new areas because they look exactly like everywhere else you've already been before. And speaking of the same, be prepared to hear nothing but piano music the entire game. Despite having a wonderfully composed soundtrack full of beautiful themes and compositions, I Am Setsuna's music eventually leaves you with wanting for a soundtrack full of other instruments than a piano. It's the same feeling as if you took your favorite Final Fantasy game and replaced the music in the game with a piano-only soundtrack. It's good to hear once or twice, but it just isn't the same as the original soundtrack. Fighting monsters in I Am Setsuna will also start to feel repetitive after a while too. Not because of numerous battles, but because you eventually start fighting the same enemies you fought previously that are only reskinned with a different color palette. Be prepared to fight penguins over and over again. And the color palette swap for enemies is additionally frustrating, as the elite versions of enemies are also just reskinned versions of previously encountered enemies, sometimes making it confusing as to whether or not you're fighting a new, slightly harder version of an enemy or the tougher elite version. It's important to know the difference between the two versions, as the elite enemies can really deal some damage to your party and overwhelm you if you're not prepared to fight them. This leads to another point about encountering difficult enemies. The party cannot run away from enemies during combat via battle command or holding down the L and R buttons. Instead, the only way to run away from enemies is to use an item called a Fogstone, which will create a smoke screen and instantly end combat. If you never found a Fogstone or forgot to buy some, you can potentially find yourself in a battle that you're sure to lose with no means of escape. This happened to me once during my playthrough because I had no idea how to run away from battles, and I ended up losing an hour of playtime because of it. I ended up in a fight with monsters that would perform a high damage attack to all of my party members upon the monster's death, putting me in a bind that I at the time didn't know how to get out of. Now as for character development, the characters in I Am Setsuna are not fleshed out very well. There just isn't much to each character's backstory, and there isn't enough playtime to develop them any further. The game simply keeps throwing one new party member at you after another. I Am Setsuna never forces you to use specific characters in your party like Chrono Trigger often did. In Chrono Trigger, you had dedicated times that focused on the relationships between characters and got you to know them better. In I Am Setsuna, you merely collect characters and form a party of your own choosing throughout the entire game. In fact, I ended up playing most of the game with the exact same party as I had no other reason not to. I Am Setsuna also presents the player with a number of dialogue choices throughout the game, but unfortunately, every single one of these dialogue choices are nothing but an illusion of choice. No matter what dialogue option you choose, the same outcome will always happen and the story does not change because of your choice. Overall, I Am Setsuna is a very safe game that doesn't change much to the traditional RPG formula. It has a very familiar story that we have already seen before in other RPGs. Despite some of my grievances with the game, I still found it quite enjoyable and definitely worth playing. I recommend this game to anyone who loves classical 90s RPGs like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy. However, I would advise waiting for a sale before buying I Am Setsuna, as the game's $40 price tag is a bit too much to ask for with the short 20-hour story and lack of replayability or New Game Plus. Thank you for watching my review of I Am Setsuna. If you found this review helpful, please be sure to give the video a like. If you have played the game before, please be sure to leave a comment down below about your own experiences with it. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. And remember, you've got to get the power up to beat the game.